What is up everyone, it's Horror Master and I'm back with yet another video, and I decided to do something a little bit more different by the name of the title. And this was probably one of the most daunting things I've ever done because it's probably one of my favorite bands of all time. I decided to do an entire rank 'em all on Swallow the Sun. Now if you know me from the Horseman podcast, you know I love, and I mean I love Swallow the Sun to death. So the thing about Swallow the Sun, I mean, they were formed in the early 2000s out of Finland. They were formed by, of course, the man behind Swallow the Sun, Juha Ravio. And throughout the years, I mean, their lyrics have become more of the death, grief, loss, despair. Everything, the goodness. I mean, a lot of depth to the point that Swallow the Sun has become my favorite death doom band of all time. To the point that I even got one of their shirts from the live album. And to the point, and I'm not joking, that I decided on my new vest to almost dedicate an entire back to Swallow the Sun. Like literally, it's an entire shrine to Swallow the Sun. And I'm not finished with it yet, but that's get to show you how much I love Swallow the Sun. And how I started with Swallow the Sun is kind of a bit of a funny story. So around... I get this first one. There we go. So around 2018, I was going through some videos trying to find new music. Like every single metalhead wants to find new music, and I came up with a video in Loudwire, and I don't remember the name of it. That was maybe top 10 death metal vocalists who can both do the growls and the more clean vocals. And in one of the videos, of course, Miko, the lead vocalist from Swallow the Sun, was in that top 10, and the song that was appeared was Rooms and Shadows from Songs from the North 1, 2, and 3. That caught my attention, so I went and saw the music video, and I was hooked. I loved the song that I listened to probably 10, 15 times, and this was around the same time that when a Shadow was about to come out. So I add more to it. And ever since that, I've been a Swallow the Sun fan ever since. They've become probably my second favorite band of all time, next to AC/DC. So that tells you how much Swallow the Sun has impacted my life and has changed me for better or worse, which I'll explain it when we get to the albums. But enough jibber jabber. It's getting on into the ranking. So before I do the ranking, I do want to mention that I have included almost everything that Swallow the Sun has ever done, from the studio albums to the EPs and to the live album. But there are some things that I didn't want to put them in the ranking because they're not really Swallow the Sun, even though they're associated with Swallow the Sun, but something you all should check out. One of the first things that I do want to bring up, probably one of the main things that I do want to bring out, is, of course, the Trees of Eternity, Our Nightingale album. If you all know the story, the backstory of this album, you know that Juha Ravio, along with the late great Elias Starbridge, this was their side project, which was supposed to develop into more albums. Unfortunately, Alia passed away in around 2016, early 2016. That, of course, I mean, Juha and Alia were partners. They were a thing. And of course, Juha almost didn't release this album. That he was like, you know what, people need to listen to what this album is, and probably one of the finest works out of Alia's repertoire. Of course, songs like Requiem, Condemn of Silence, A Million Tears, Broken Mirror, Gallows Bird, which has Nick Holmes from Paradise Lost singing some of the male parts. I mean, it's if you like Swallow the Sun, of course, if you like Alia, you're gonna love this album. Next up, of course, we have Alia's self-titled, Alias Starbridge, which comes with 2 CDs, which is a big thing. Of course, comes with the acoustic version of the album and the more electric side of the version of the album. And these are recordings that Alia did before she passed away. Things that Juha wasn't so sure that he was going to release because, again, he was still in grief when, the whole thing with Alia happened. Of course, this came out in 2020. So it was kind of shocking that Juha released this material, which thankfully he did, because my god, some of the songs are so phenomenal. Of course, the acoustic side of Breeze or The Tower, or even the electric version of My Well. I mean, they're both phenomenal albums. They're both phenomenal discs. So again, check this out. And the last album in this whole story is, of course, from Halatar, No Stars Upon the Bridge. Now, this one is a side project that, of course, another side project that Juha did alongside the former drummer from him, and I'm forgetting his fucking name. Forgetting his name. The lead vocalist from was it Insomnium? I don't remember, but one of the lead vocalists either from Insomnium or a lot of melodic death metal band that, you know, it's a great album, and it's a more depressing album, and of course from the screams to the project. I mean, this was still during the time that Juha still couldn't bear with the fact that Elia passed away. So, you know, taking that into consideration, this album is dark and heavy. I mean, just by the lyrics itself, you can tell that Juha was still in grief. But again, kind of that griefness became to something positive that released this album. And a bit of a side note, I do want to bring out a band that, if you like Swallow Sun, this band, I've compared them that they're kind of like the sisters of Swallow Sun. That's the best comparison I can say, because when I first listened to this band, I honestly thought they were a Swallow Sun clone, which is not a bad thing. I mean, there are many bands that want to be Swallow Sun, but this is probably the one that kind of is close to Swallow Sun. That's why I'm calling them the sisters to Swallow Sun, and that the band is called Evadne. This is their latest album, which is The Pale Light Upon the Firelights, which honestly, at first hands, I honestly thought it was a legit Swallow Sun clone. And, excuse me, like I said, they are kind of a Swallow Sun clone, but in a good way. If you like Swallow Sun like me, you'll definitely love Evadne. I mean, they have their previous catalog is amazing as well. So, if you have the chance to listen to Evadne, give them a listen, please. But now, and this is probably the hardest thing I have to do. I have to literally rank every single thing Swallow Sun has ever released, which is kind of like picking your favorite kid. It's kind of difficult. And like I said, Swallow Sun has no bad albums. Every single album is different, unique, masterful. Everything about them they do is a masterpiece. So take that into consideration. But for this instance, this is my ranking. If you have a different ranking of Swallow Sun albums, let me know in the comments. I would love to know your guys' opinion. So at the very bottom of the barrel, and like I said, nothing against this album or nothing. Every single album is pure perfection. But to me, this one is at the lower bottom. And of course, I'm talking about Emerald Forest and the Blackbird. Now, this came out around 2012. And the thing about Emerald Forest and Blackbird that I really do enjoy, I mean, from songs like The Labyrinth of London Part 4, of course, the tribute to Peter Steele on April 14, which, of course, we know that Typo Negative was a huge influence on Mikko and Juha Swallow Sun in creating the band. Consider Wall, I mean, that monstrous ballad. Again, nothing bad against Emerald Forest. It's a phenomenal album, but to me, I felt it was probably the weakest album in the discography, which says a lot. I mean, like I said, they have no bad albums. Every single album is a masterful work. Next up, we have Hope. This one is a bit of an odd one because this was around the time that I guess Swallow Sun wanted to go a bit more commercial, if I get to say so myself. When you have songs like Don't Fall Asleep Part 2, which is probably the lead singer from the album, to even underrated songs like Doomed to Walk the Earth, which, my God, if you listen to that ending, is so Funeral Doom-esque. From the title track to Justice of Suffering. I mean, like I said, same thing I said about Emerald Forest. There's no bad songs on this album. But to me, a bit better than Emerald Forest. But again, around the same time, they want to be a bit more commercial. And following that, of course, we have New Moon. Now, this is the album that I think is when they wanted to go 100% commercial. Because, I mean, of course, when you have songs like Falling World, when you have the infamous Dan Swano, you know, in the song, Says a Lot, which is a phenomenal song. Of course, you also have Light of the Lake, Horror Part 3. You have Heaven Cries Blood, one of the first collaborations that Aaliyah Starbridge did with Swallow Sun, and would later form this friendship and eventually this love interest between Juha and Aaliyah. But also, Weight of the Dead is probably one of the good songs of Swallow Sun, because they try to, the lyrics. If you read the lyrics of Weight of the Dead, they reference every single Swallow Sun album at the time, from the Ghost of Lost to the Plague of Butterflies EP to everything. So it is kind of a cool thing that they kind of reference the album titles in that song. But again, nothing against New Moon. A phenomenal album. Like I said, this is kind of like picking your favorite kid. It's kind of hard to do. So you must be thinking, man, is really thinking about it. Yeah, I am thinking about it a lot. Next up, following that, we have The Ghost of Lost. Now, this is their sophomore effort. This is where they kind of went more Death Doom. When you start a song like The Giant, which is probably one of the best songs they've ever written, a slow, almost like, I want to say, if I can find it, almost like 12 minutes song in length. That says a lot to start off the album, which a lot of bands don't usually like to start with long songs. They usually like to start with slower, maybe 5 to 4 minute songs. Not Swallow Sun. Swallow Sun just went on, boom, 12-minute song, masterpiece. But as you go along the album, of course, you have songs like Forgiver, Gloom, Beauty, and Despair, which will later, inspire Songs from the North and eventually the live album. And that album cover, I mean, at the time, I mean, not edgy, but beautiful yet sad. I mean, again, one thing I forgot to mention, Swallow Sun's album covers are some of the best album covers I've ever seen in my life. So instantly recognizable. One of the things that Swallow Sun can do well is the album covers. Next up, on top of it, we have, of course, the debut, The Morning Never Came. This is a more straight up melodic death metal album. I'll just say it right now, even though it has some doomy elements, to me this is more melodic death metal, because this is where the band was barely beginning to get their sound. It's when they're trying to find themselves, so it's understandable that the band is trying to find their ground in what will later become their signature melodic death doom. When you have songs like Deadly Nights, Hold the Wall, Under the Waves, even Solitude, the Catamas cover, is a great song. I mean, when you take a band like Catamas, the infamous Solitude, and created your own, make it a unique song to it, even though that song has been covered so many times, but with Swallow Sun they made it more beautiful, more haunting, more sad, if you could get it even more doomy at most. But again, The Morning Never Came, one of the best debuts in the 2003, if I remember correctly, 2003, 2002, around there. But again, phenomenal album. Next up, we have, of course, their first live album in this band in 20 years. And I'm talking about 20 years of Gloom, Beauty, and Despair live in Helsinki. When this was announced, I kid you not, I waited till like 3 in the morning, because I knew something was gonna release around that time, in maybe around February, March of this time. I knew they were gonna release something. I just didn't know what it would be. And of course, this came out last year, and immediately when the 3 o'clock hit, I went to the website and it says pre-order because the live album, and I instantly pre-ordered like nonstop. Like I said, that's where I got the shirt and the live album. It was a package deal, which, you know what, to me was worth it. And this kept me in check for the better half of last year, because I was supposed to see Swallow Sun in 2020. Of course, the pandemic hit, and of course that never happened. And of course they came to Texas later in November, but of course I couldn't go because of work and all that. But again, this album kept me in check. When you have your first album in 20 years of your career, 20 years, what more can you want? Of course, both, it's a 2-disc set, which I gotta say, it's phenomenal. Actually, 3 discs. Sorry, 3 discs. The first part is, of course, the kind of like the Songs from the North Part 2 side, which all the acoustic sides. And then the second disc is more the heavy side songs. Of course, we have songs like Here on the Black Earth, Plague of Butterflies Part 2, Sad Wings, The Giant, Empire of Lost. Phenomenal songs. And of course, this one comes also with a DVD, which is the closest that I have to see Swallow Sun live until now. So I can say this is probably the closest I'll ever get until I actually see them live, which I can do one day if God ever lets me. Next up, we have the Illumina Aura EP. Now this came out right before When the Shadows Pours into the Light. And of course I didn't know what it was. After I got into more Swallow Sun, I went back and listened to Illumina Aura, a just 15-minute song, which is unlike anything Swallow Sun has ever released. It's something unique that they've ever done, because this is not your typical Swallow Sun song structure. This has more doominess, more sadness, more grief. I mean, that's Swallow Sun, but the thing about the music videos, it's unique because it doesn't feel like an actual song. It feels more like a tribe or something out of a ritual you're gonna do in like a paganism. I mean, even if you look at the music video, it's not like Swallow Sun. It's haunting, it's chilling, and this is something that I do eventually want to get. I mean, I know it was only released in vinyl, and I hope eventually, if Swallow Sun ever does this, they release it on CD. But by the looks of it, it might not. So I might have to get the vinyl just to actually say I actually have the entire discography. So that's something I am hopefully to get in the future. Now we're up to the top 4. We're almost there, people. At number 4, we have Moonflowers. This was my 2021 album of the year. And the thing about Moonflowers compared to their predecessor, When a Shadow, is that this is a more dark, angry album. Because Juha has stated in interviews that he hates this album. Not because it's a bad production, not because of the lyrics, not because of, the pandemic, and partially because of the pandemic, but he hates this album because he wrote it when he had to go to that dark place, a dark place that he wished he didn't go back to, because he really didn't want to go back to the dark place. And when you go into that dark place, it can return to a man insane, or even, do something that you're not supposed to. With Juha's case, he wrote those songs out of anger, and it turned to something beautiful. I mean, of course, from the album cover, which the little moon or sun is made out of his own blood. Which, how much metal can you get to that? To the flowers that he added to the painting, which were flowers he picked up right after Aaliyah's funeral. So kind of adds a sense of personality to it. But if you go into the album, songs like The House Has No Home, which has a more black metal-esque sound to it, to The Fight of Your Life, to Enemy, to Woven into Sorrow, everything about this album is fucking amazing. And the thing that this album brings is that Swallow Sun released the string version first, which is kind of odd for bands to do that first, because usually bands release the album and then release later on a string quartet version of the album. With Swallow Sun, they did that first just to give us a kind of a sneak preview of the album, which I really enjoyed. And not to mention, after the album was released, they released an entire almost 50-minute movie animation of the album, which I honestly enjoy the living crap out of it. And that's why I admire Swallow Sun so much, because they find ways to express themselves in different ways, from music to orchestral to even animation. How many bands can you say that have done all those things in 22 years of their career? Not a lot of bands have done it, which that's why this album was my 2021 album of the year. Next up, we have, of course, the infamous Plague of Butterflies EP. A 30-minute masterpiece in itself, probably one of the best Swallow Sun albums they've ever played. I don't think they've ever played the entire song in its entirety, if I'm aware of. I don't think they have. They've only played, probably, because it's separated into 2 parts. Part 1 being Losing the Suns, Part 2 Plague of Butterflies, and of course Part 3 E Vale 10000. They always like to play the part 2, which again, it's understandable. It's a 30-minute song. Nobody has the time to actually listen to a 30-minute song, even though I would personally love to see the 30-minute song in its entirety. I'm just saying, to Swallow Sun, if you're watching this, please play the entire Plague of Butterflies song in its entirety. You have no idea how much fans would enjoy the living crap out of it. But you know, the more lyrics you read, it's typical Swallow Sun, dark, heavy, gloomy, and it's a ride of emotions you have, from anger to sadness to even at the ending you feel like from a journey that even though you're sad, but you're happy. Like it's kind of like a happy sad. You're sad that you're happy, or maybe you're happy that you're sad. I don't know. It's kind of those mixed emotions that honestly I love about Swallow Sun. It makes you want to feel, and that's why it's ranked at my number 3. Down to the last two. If you've gone through this entire list, you kind of know the last two albums in my ranking. Now, these two albums were kind of difficult to actually rank because they're like probably my two favorite albums from Swallow Sun. So it can go either or, but to me, I had to give this to number 1. So at number 2, we have probably their best album they've ever done, their masterful work, the album that I do suggest every new Swallow Sun fan check out if you have the time and energy. Songs for the North 1, 2, and 3. First of all, I just want to say, the packaging of this, look at the package of this CD. It's a fucking brick, which honestly, I honestly like it. But not only that, when you have 3 separate albums, Gloom, Beauty, and Despair, the Gloom part being more traditional, melodic a Death Doom album. The Beauty side when it's a more acoustic, more down to earth, personalized experience, and Despair a full-on funeral doom-esque album, which again, this must have been a huge undertaking for Swallow Sun to release the album back in 2015, and has gone as probably their best album to date. And every single song on this album, from the 3 albums, is pure perfection. From the Memory of Light, Heartstrings Shattering, I mentioned before, Rooms and Shadows, to the title track, to Autumn of the Empire, to 7 Hours Light, The Clouds Prepare for Battle, The Gathering of Black Moths. There's nothing Swallow Sun has ever done that it's bad, worse. Everything is pure gold, and this one is, my God, probably their best album they've ever done in their entire career. So there's one album that I do suggest, 1 or 2 albums that says to every single brand new Swallow Sun fan to get into. This is the one. And my number 1. This is the album that got me into Swallow Sun. The album that kind of saved me, because during the time that I listened to this album, I was in a really, really dark place. And this album saved me from that darkness that sometimes when I listen to this album, I still cry because of all the emotions that I felt in that year. All the anger, everything that I felt. And of course, when this album came out, everything that Swallow Sun sang, I felt it. Like, I could relate to it. And that's why this album is my favorite Swallow Sun album of all time. The album that saved me from all that. And this was my 2019 album of the year, When the Shadows Force Into the Light. Not to mention the backstory. Of course, this was the first album the Swallow Sun released after the passing of Aaliyah Starbridge. So going into the album, you already know this album is gonna be dark, heavy, depressing, and sad. And the thing about this album that really does well is that it expresses everything Juha, wanted it to do. And it's a love story, like I mentioned before. This is a love story between 2 lovers which were separated by death. And of course, Juha could have done the usual thing and drink himself to death and do all things and drugs, but he decided to read. He decided to write and write and write, and eventually created this masterpiece. Every single song in this album is pure gold, pure perfection. From the title track, The Crimson Crown, Firelights Upon the Water, Clouds on Your Side, Here on the Blackbird, which is probably my favorite Swallow song of all time, Never Left, to even Clouds on Your Side, the little French verse at the very end, which was written by Aaliyah, and of course was added to the album by the French vocalist, I forgot her name, let's see if I have it here, Clement Curry, she sang those little parts at the very end of Clouds on Your Side, which added more personality to the album. And it's probably the one album, like I said, solos that saved my life in 2019, because without this album, I don't know how I would have been later on till now, because like I said, I was in a really dark place in 2019, and when I first listened to this album, I began to cry. I still cry at times because the beautiness of this album, from again I kind of relate to what Juha was trying to sing with Aaliyah, and the passing of Aaliyah, kind of letting it go. Even though I didn't experience something like that, I kind of could relate to the lyrics that Juha tried to express in the album from everything. And I can go on and on about this album, but if there is one album that I seriously worship, one of the albums that I do worship ever, it's Back in Black, To the Nameless Dead, The Satanist, When the Shadows Burst into the Light, The Greater Love Songs, Volume 666, so on and so forth. So that's why When the Shadows Burst into the Light is my number one Swallow Sun album. And that does it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. This was probably one of the hardest rank 'em alls I've ever done, even though I haven't done AC/DC, which that will be even a harder rank 'em all. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the little fun things. Go follow me on Instagram, where I upload, things about my collection, memes, metal memes, wrestling stuff, all the fun stuff. And I hope, like I said, this was a really fun video to do. It was really difficult because it's like trying to pick your favorite child, which it's really hard to do. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you're all along for the ride, because I'm going to bring you more videos eventually in the future. Maybe more rank 'em alls, maybe CD update collections, Funko Pops and all that. So like I said, stay tuned for a ride, and until then, stay metal.